Welcome to Sawyer's August webinar. Uh, we're going to be talking about ending the summer strong and going into fall just as strong. As people are trickling in, please, you can go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. I'll try to give people a couple minutes here to get settled. I know many of us are coming from other things, summer camp, the beach, maybe. So I want to give people a moment here. But I will start. Dylan from Sawyer in Brooklyn. Hi, Janice from Little Scholars. Great to have you. Let me also tell you a little bit about what we are going to be doing today. One thing I'll mention is we're recording today. We sometimes like to share these, not sure if we're going to, but we might share some of it. Some of you already let us know whether you were okay or not with us sharing any participation that you partake in today. If we do share this, if you haven't let us know, you can DM me and let me know either way, or answer our form field question in your My Account profile. But just wanted to let everyone know we are recording, and maybe we'll send out all or some of the conversation today. Like I said, introduce yourself in the Zoom chat. I see a bunch of people doing that already. Hi, Ara, Heather, Taylor, Marissa, Stephanie, Jill. This is great. I don't know everyone yet. I know many of you, so nice to meet those of you who I don't know. Use the chat to ask questions. I'm going to run through some stuff, and then I'll open it up for general conversation. So use the chat to participate in the conversation or to ask me questions along the way. And then feel free to DM me too. Hey, Portia. If you have a question or a comment or something that you're not sure you want to share publicly, you can just DM me and only I'll see it. So trying to, create a comfortable, safe space here for everyone. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at a marketing timeline to sort of go over what you should be doing right now and soon in the coming months. And then I have some discussion topics that we're going to talk through that center around finishing out the summer strong and entering and making it through the fall strongly as well. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from some or all of you about how you think through some of the things that are on your plate during this and the coming months. And then, very exciting, we have a surprise guest who will be joining us towards the end to share some marketing resources. So I will tell you more about that as the time comes. In the meantime, unrelated, I wanted to just highlight this cool little GIF here. I'm pointing, but I don't know if I'm pointing at the right thing. You got this sun waking up. This is part of a GIF collection that we have you can find it at Hello Sawyer on Giphy, or you can search Sawyer on Instagram and use it. I'll tell you more about that later on. But you'll see these poking around throughout the conversation today. Last thing I want to mention is it is August, as you may or may not be aware. And this month, Sawyer has doubled the referral reward. So if you refer another provider and they join Sawyer and stick around for, I think it's, you know what, I don't want to say the wrong thing off the top of my head, so check our help center on that. They stick around for a little bit, you get a reward when it's double what it's been recently, and they also get a discount on their subscription. So if there's anyone you have in mind who you think might be a good partner for Sawyer, now is the time to let them know. Okay, that's the agenda. Let's see what else we got going on. Oh, me, hi. Like I said, I know some of you already, I don't know everyone. So just wanted to reintroduce myself to those who I do already know, and introduce myself the first time to everyone else. So my name is Dylan. I am the Senior Manager of Account Management at Sawyer and an account manager for providers with scale subscription, which is hard to say. But all that really boils down to the fact that it's my job to make sure that you get the most out of your partnership with us. whatever that looks like. And I work a little bit more closely with providers who are on a scale subscription. I live in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn with my wife and our 7-month-old. Before joining Sawyer, I ran a STEM summer camp and after school program for 5 years. And before that, I was a museum educator at a history museum in the city. This part feels a little written, but I wrote it, so it's true. I love working with providers to help make sure that you're set up for success and that you're reaching as many participants as possible with your spectacular programming. And I mean that. And I'm sure many of you have had the experience of like looking on the HiSawyer.com marketplace and seeing cool classes, whether they're yours or other providers, and thinking, that is very cool. I wish that I could have taken that as a child. This is very true. So I'm really genuinely excited to like work with educators and people in this field to sort of like spread that. In my free time outside of Sawyer, I play the drums. And look, very unsubtle gifts again on this slide. Maybe there'll be more subtle in future slides. Okay, enough about me. I should mention also that these gifts were designed by our senior visual designer, Lauren. Quick shout out there. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about your marketing timeline. Summer's winding down, whether it feels like it or not, which means fall is right around the corner. So now is the time to create urgency, sort of double urgency, right? Summer stuff and fall stuff if you do both. So if you do summer camps and after school, this is a busy month. So let's start with August, where we're at now. You got to be busy and you got to be bold. Here's what you should be doing now. In addition to running any programming that you have, work to fill the remaining summer spots you have, right? You've already staffed, you already have your location, you already have materials. So at this point, filling extra spots, even if you're not getting full price for them, is still helpful. Another thing you should be doing is working to convert summer families to fall families, which sometimes can be pretty hard, but that's one of the things I want to hear from folks about a little later in the conversation, some strategies for that. Retarget previous customers, maybe people you haven't heard from in a while. Maybe they just are around in the fall, or they just want to participate in your programming in the fall. Don't forget about them. It might feel like it's been a while, but if you don't want them to forget about you, don't forget about them either. And then reach new clients as well. Obviously, the nature of children's activity programming is that kids age out. So just to even stay at where you're at, you always need to be recruiting new families. And lastly, for this month, with all this stuff, don't be shy, right? You got to be bold. You got to look to find people. And so with all of these things, don't be shy about it, because you may not be on someone's radar if you are, who maybe would love to be reminded of something that you're doing. Okay, we can talk more about all that in a bit. Moving on to what September will look like, which is closer than it might feel like. This is, I like to think of it as in case you missed it month. So even if you've been doing outreach in August, don't assume that your families have been paying as much attention to you as you have been paying to you, right? They're not probably checking your website every day. So make sure that even if you've already shared some information, you're reminding people about it. And also, a big thing that happens in September is there are a lot of school holidays and closings, or depending on where you are in the country, sometimes later starts. So take advantage of those days. You can do camps. Individual camp days can bring in a lot of money, or the opposite, free open house days can bring in a lot of people. So this can be a really great way to get people into your space, which I feel like once you have someone there who you've met, who you can make a connection with, who can sort of experience what it's like to actually be in your space, that's much easier to get them to come back than just trying to find someone online, or by posting flyers or things like that. And those are strategies I want to talk about later too. Moving on to October, which I know feels like it is a far away, and it is. October is sort of tends to be a slower enrollment period. most people who are doing fall after school are already signed up. You're probably not signing up for summer camp yet, although some providers are posting that early, believe it or not. I wouldn't wait till October, though, to make a plan for what you're going to do in October, even if your plan for October is to plan for what's after October. In other words, you plan now to use that time then to plan for the future. You can plan school breaks, your Black Friday sale, start to get gift cards together, spooky seasonal events or any other sort of seasonally relevant things that come to sort of like start to generate money in a slower month. But also, I encourage you to think about that now, because that way, then when it comes, you can hold yourself accountable to what you wanted to get done in October, as opposed to waiting then and sort of like having it hit you in sort of a surprising way. And then on to October, which is November, which is winter and summer, sort of. And it feels funny to talk about next summer during this summer. But the two things that sort of happen in November that are similar to August is you've got both your school year programming stuff happening and summer stuff happening at the same time. So for a lot of providers, this is when you're doing like sort of continue on if someone registered for a fall semester, and whether you do winter as well or just spring. This is often when that sort of like continue on, like retain your fall folks happens. The other thing that happens is launching summer camp. It's really a best practice. I mean, depending on where you are, this might be unheard of, but not worse to be first. So really a best practice is to launch your early bird summer camp pricing for Black Friday. Okay. That's way ahead. We're gonna circle back now and talk a little bit more about what is right in front of us. But first, a little preview about what's to come. This is a preview of the marketing resources that we're going to talk about later on. So let's see. Great, cool. Okay. And there it is. Okay. So what I want to do and hopefully spend most of our time on today is sort of an open discussion. I feel like I have a fair amount of insight generally into how these things work. As you know, I come from the provider world, and I spend pretty much all day, every day talking to providers. But everything I know is sort of generalized, right? We work with folks all around the country who do many different types of programming, many different types of times of year. There are many, many differences. So I'm never going to know your stuff as well as you do. So what I really am looking forward to is hearing from you about what works for you, what has worked for you. And I think hopefully there's a fair amount of overlap between some of the people in the room here today. So I have about 6 questions that I want to go through. I'll read them off, and then we can talk about each one, and we can kind of do whatever feels comfortable. We can raise hands, we can type in the chat, we can just shout it out. Let's sort of feel how it goes. But before we do any of that, let me just take you through the questions so you can start hopefully thinking about what you do, what you might want to try, what's worked in the past, what hasn't, why. Okay, question 1. What are some ways to encourage campers to buy more camp? And I'll put these back up as we go through. So no need to jump in and answer, but feel free to type stuff in the chat if you have initial reactions. 2, when is the best time to launch fall registrations? And when is the best time or way to share when, or even that you will even have fall registrations? 3, what are some approaches to get campers to buy after school? 4, what are some approaches to get last year's after school families to return for this school year? And bonus question, should you market to families with a kid who is aged out? 5, what are some ways to attract brand new families? And lastly, how do you decide when to raise prices? And bonus, when or how do you announce it? So you can see that all these questions are sort of related to that marketing timeline I talked about. So hopefully these are timely. Maybe these are not all timely for you, but maybe some of the strategies, even for things that maybe aren't immediately relevant to you now, will help get the gears turning and be helpful as you think things through. Okay, great. Let's start with the first one. And I'm going to just throw the question up there and kind of open it up. I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to share about what are some ways that you can encourage campers to buy more camp. Feel free to, like I said, type in the chat, raise your hand, or if you just want to unmute and say, if you do speak out loud, it might be helpful to say your name, where you're calling from, and name of your provider. Looks like a couple people are throwing things in the chat, which is great. I'll call them out here. Multi-week discount. Yes, tiered discounts. Great. Discounts for sure are a great way to get people who've already bought camp to buy more camp. Sibling discounts, 3 for 3. We have discount strategy. Does anyone want to jump in and share anything else that they've tried? Cool. All right. I'm gonna share some. I hear an unmute.
That was me. Hi, Dylan. I'm happy to jump in.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Elisa. I run Treasure Trunk Theater in Brooklyn. And one thing we do, all of those things that everyone else just mentioned, but another thing we started doing, especially for certain locations that maybe we're trying to get more registrations for future weeks, is at the end of the week, emailing everyone who just took camp with us, if they haven't signed up for more camp yet, and be like, we loved having you. Come back again. Here's 10% off. And yeah. And like when we're like fresh in their mind too, because they just finished an amazing week.
Yes. Well, and that's honestly like the best strategy is to like have an amazing program, which implicitly we all do. We probably wouldn't be doing this if that wasn't a priority. So yeah, I think that's great. And the other thing that's really, I think, smart about the way that you approach it is not only are you like targeting specific people, but because you're giving like a specific discount to them, maybe it feels extra special and it doesn't like alienate people who paid the full price. You know, like changing your prices last minute could get some people who paid the full price to say, hey, wait a minute, can I get a partial refund now? But if you're really just saying like, hey, you're targeting specific people and saying, hey, this was really great. It was great to have you here. I'd love to have you back. You know, maybe like your kid got along really well with this other camper and this other camper. They're coming next week. Would love to see them all together again. Here's a little discount. Sign up by Friday and we'll make it work. That's a great strategy. Minnie also says, love sibling discounts and differentiating offerings camp themes from week to week. Oh, smart. Yeah. So maybe saying, hey, you know what, you did this week. Maybe a logical next step or a new complement or a new challenge would be this other theme that we have next week. Sherry at Firecracker Math did $50 off to parents who already attended classes to fill the final 2 weeks. Love it. And Jesse talks up the next camp week with the kids. I love that. That's first here. I think this is like a really interesting conversations that I've had with a number of providers over the years in terms of like, okay, if you're selling your programming, who is your customer? Is it the kid or is it the parent? So I love Jesse's perspective here, which is like, you know what, make sure the kids are wanting to come back, because that's probably going to go a long way with the parents for sure. Heather says, what is an easy way to automate this email strategy? I'm a team of 1 and Sawyer doesn't have automated emails. We do not, but I will share a resource for how to make sure you can segment audiences so you can send emails through Sawyer to very specific people. Okay, great. Let me feel free to keep these coming, keep these ideas coming, even if we move on to another topic and you have something that you want to share here. I'm going to throw out a few that I threw in here, and they echo a lot of what we're already saying. So this sort of echoes what Jesse was saying. I think it's a great idea to empower kids to talk about their experience. How many times have you seen like at pickup, a parent or whoever's doing pickup saying, "Oh, what did you do at camp today?" And the kid like shrugs, just says, "I don't know," or just like walks away and does something else, right? And parents want to know, right? So making sure your kids have vocabulary to talk about what they did at camp is not only a good like sales tactic because it like helps the parents understand that they did something, but it's actually like good for the kids to like reflect on their experience and practice articulating it and understanding what they did. So this doesn't have to feel like an icky sales thing to involve the kids. Molly agrees as a parent. Reminders. So again, and I'm going to harp on this over and over again today because it's a reminder and reminders are good, that not everyone knows your stuff as well as you do. So it may not occur to parents that you have a camp next week, let alone that there's room. You can post the amount of availability. You can show it going down as things sell to add some urgency. And then discounts, like everyone was saying this, definitely discounts, especially targeted discounts for sure. Great. Any other insight or anything else that anyone wants to share about some ways to encourage campers to buy more camp? And I know for some people right now, this feels like we're very much in the middle of camp season and filling it up is big. And for other people, camp is over. Maybe you didn't even do camp and you're on to the next thing. But anything else here before we move on? I'll share two more from the chat. I've been posting a lot on our IG stories so the parents see our day-to-day activities and send them a note at the top of the week to let them know that they can see photos and videos throughout the day. That's great. If you have the bandwidth to do that, that's awesome. I mean, I don't think there's anything better than creating some FOMO for future weeks by showing how much is going on during the week that you're there. And Marissa similarly says she likes sending photos. Yeah, if you can, and this goes back to like empowering kids to share, you don't have to rely on the kids, right? Like you can do it. If you can answer that question for parents, then that's great. What did my kid do? Cool. All right, let's move on to the second one here. Okay, and again, we've got a lovely GIF created by our senior visual designer, Lauren. Okay, let's see what question 2 was. When is the best time to launch fall registration? And related, when is the best time to share when or that you have fall offerings? So feel free to comment in the chat or unmute and jump in. When do you and even if you don't feel like you know the answer to the best time, when do you launch registration? When does it feel right to do it? Or when do you get around to it?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I run a kids fitness gym which has after school and summer camp in Long Island City, New Jersey, just in Queens. And I am finding that before school lets out is when I need to start publishing.
Sorry. You're saying like before school
for the fall in June. Yeah.
Yep. Just wanted to make sure we got that.
Yeah, clear. Because I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years and every year this neighborhood notoriously was like last minute. And I still, like when you said you're not busy in October, I still get a lot of last minute ads because people just, it's like the school year comes and they're surprised, so.
Yes.
And then even last year, New York City schools started the 13th. They started so late. So this year is the first year we're back to the after Labor Day Thursday in 3 or 4 years. So anyway, every year I find that people are asking me earlier and earlier. Like I do my summer camp, usually January, February to publish. I was having people asking me about the fall after school. And I was like, I don't have the ability to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
So
it's not just you.
Yeah. So I'm just looking like 6 months ahead, or I divide my year into 3 semesters.
Okay.
So it's fall, spring, and then summer.
Uh-huh.
That's how I, in my brain, like look at
Yeah.
activities and things, and I try and be a semester ahead.
Yeah.
They're not, they're not equal length. They're not equally, in time,
Mhm.
but that's why. So I look at that to determine when I should.
Yeah, makes sense. And that's great. And I'm seeing in the chat that that's like ringing true for a lot of people. So Minnie says, agreed, launch at the end of the previous school year. Twinkle Toes says the same thing. So, and let me just share exactly what Twinkle Toes said. I was going to say the same thing. I launched my fall schedule before Memorial Day. So far, I have the best advanced registration for fall I've had in 10 years. Yeah. So this is great. And I think like, does anyone else want to share their experience here around when to launch? Successes? Sounds like earlier the better is what's ringing true so far.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, who's that?
This is Leah. I'm in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. I run an art studio called The Loft. If you open registration that early, do you then get a lot of people who change plans and end up, canceling or not? I feel like if you're making plans that far ahead, they're probably not gonna, stay the same.
Great question.
Is it worth it to launch ahead, fill them up, but then have to do a lot of changes, or is it better to just do this sometime in the summer when people are kind of more ready to commit?
Dylan, can I speak to that?
By all means.
I actually had there's like another art place that has just opened in the neighborhood, and we like talk a lot. And I have what I did before was a lawyer. So it's like, I have very strict registration policies. And I'm like, if you sign up, you are committed for the semester, because inevitably somebody at the end always wants to be like, like two people were like, oh, my husband works from home, we're not coming anymore. And then somebody else was like, we're going to be traveling. And I was like, well, I'm happy that your family are able to do these things. I was like, but as the policy state, and like, I put in a link to the policies everywhere. It's in Sawyer, it's on my page, it's on the registration page, it's in the thank you for registering, please make sure you've read our policies. In the questionnaire for summer camp, I make people acknowledge that they read our policies, because when I first started, I did a lot of that where I needed people and I didn't want to alienate people. And now I'm like, it cost me twice as much money to deal with all the changes. And so I just make it very clear. And also what I'll do is, since Sawyer added the deposit option, I do like $100 or $200 deposit for the semester. So this way, if it's something like, hey, we moved, I'm obviously not going to make them pay, but it's like, I'm fair but firm and I make exceptions, but then it's like, you're not dealing with the cost of doing business around, $1,000 program. And it's much easier for me to give back, this money minus a $50 administrative fee than it is for me to return, $2,000 or whatever it is. But I found that like the clearer that I am with people, because then I say, hey, if you're not sure, why don't you just wait? Like I always have an idea. Like there's always room, because I know that people end up being last minute. So I'm like, just check back with me in September. If I start to get filled up, like I'll reach out to you, or, like whatever. But because I know that I've been on some of these other calls, and it always surprises me how much people will return people's money when it's not a situation that I think warrants a child quitting. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's like,
but I also, just to put this out there too, I think so first of all, Leah, great question. Michelle, great answer. But I just want to put, Michelle, your answer in context of people who do have much more flexible refund policies, right, cancellation policies. If you do that, I don't think that then means that, I think that that's an acceptable answer to Leah's question too, which is that, okay, there are plenty of providers who put registration up early and say, you know what, don't even worry about, you can register early and we'll just give you maybe even 100% back. And as long as you don't get 100% of people getting 100% refund, you're still getting more registrations sooner than you would have otherwise. So I know some providers sort of take the opposite approach to Michelle. And like I said, I don't think there's one right answer for every community across the country. But I think both can make a lot of sense is, either way, as long as you're getting registration up sooner, you're getting registrations. And unless something happens, I don't know, like COVID, things can happen and everyone wants a refund, but that was going to happen anyway. You at least have more registrations than you would have otherwise. So I think either way, no matter what your policies are, and I'm sure we could talk for an hour about that. I think it does make a lot of sense to get things up earlier. We've got some action in the chat here. Question about how this relates to social media. This is a great question. So if you're publishing stuff sooner, is it hard to keep the content appropriate with the long run times? And I'm not sure if anyone has any experience with this. Like if you're promoting stuff that's so far out in advance, is your content related to what you're doing now or what you're promoting? I'm curious if anyone has any experience with that.
I could speak to this if anyone's
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I launched I launched fall so much earlier than I ever had before. It's been great. Just to kind of touch on like what Leah mentioned is we also don't do refunds. We just will move kids from one class to another. So say their schedule changes, like we can just offer them a different option, but we don't give them refunds with rare exceptions. The best part about this has been that, we have so many different types of families. Some people are way huge planners and have their kids like hyper scheduled for the whole year. And then some parents are like, I think we'll try ballet. So it's nice to be able to have it out there. I haven't had it like, a ton of registration, but it's been trickling in and kind of been helping me during our slow summer months. We've had a lot of excessive travel this summer, so summer's been really slow. So in that same topic is that we've been promoting on social media fall classes, summer classes, and camp, which has been very interesting. But what we've been doing is just trying to keep up with very consistent imagery for each thing. So fall classes really look like fall classes. Summer camp looks like fun and whimsical and like more playful crafts, things like that. Summer classes, have just been like, fun summer vibes, but I've been really trying to keep the marketing in terms of social media is looking as much like what it is as possible and then being consistent. So I just took a social media class and
nice.
Consistency is really important for social media.
Yeah.
Like for, and actually they recommend repetition of themes. So, kind of keeping things looking the same or sounding the same, you can kind of promote that way. And then using your stories for things that are more current, like camp.
Yeah, right. That's like a really great tip too, is that like, depending on, like when we say social media, that's a lot of stuff, right? And I think the answer is like, what do you do with social media? It sort of like depends on the channel, right? So like to your example, like stories, yeah, like the vibe is like, this is what's happening today for the most part, right? It doesn't mean you can't say, and here, sign up in the future, but I love the idea of like keeping a different, either like visual aesthetic or just like a different vibe there. And is just out of curiosity, is this just you running on social media or do you have?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, post-COVID, yes, I now do
Yeah.
all the things. We're still building up. I used to have someone. I'm hoping to pass it off soon, God willing. But so right now that's what I'm doing, and this class really helped kind of keep my content streamlined a little bit.
That's great. I just wanted to make sure that was said out loud, because I feel like from you describing it, it sounds like you have a team and you have, but really.
That's cute. Yeah, I'm working in my kitchen right now.
No, it's great. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that like that's extremely possible. I'm sure I know it's a lot of work, but it's not impossible. Great. Okay, let me just I'm going to reiterate everything we just said here. So here are my answers to this question. Best time to announce that you will have programming: as soon as possible. If your website doesn't even say that you offer fall programming, there's no reason anyone would ever go back and check to see if that changes, right? Best time to announce your launch date, as soon as possible, right? Say when you're going to say that you're going to have camp or fall, whatever it is, and say when someone should come back, right? Because otherwise, I don't know, they're going to go to your website, refresh every day. And then the last piece of this, best time to actually launch, to echo what everyone else has been saying, as soon as possible. Even if it means you have to do a little admin later for people who want to cancel or switch. Honestly, that happens anyway. Like people who sign up last minute still sometimes want to switch and cancel. So better have more people in to do that with, in my opinion. And honestly, the other thing to remember is if you launch stuff early and you don't get a ton of signups, that doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't see any benefit from launching early, because people are looking at stuff probably before they buy. And they're saying, okay, what's out there? Let me make my decision. And if your stuff is out there, then it's in the conversation, right? Or whether it's a conversation out loud, it's in consideration along with whatever else. Your stuff isn't out there, people don't know about it. They may not plan to register for it in the future. Anything else here in terms of when or how to launch fall registrations, or how to announce it, or when that anyone wants to jump in and share about?
Hi, it's Ara from Talk
Hey.
Spanish. I have a question now. Like, I'm so curious to know, like, year round, then when do we launch winter? When do we launch spring? When do we launch summer camp? I'm so curious because I'm usually just launching, let's say, like 2 months beforehand, which has not been the best idea, but we're always, well, it's been chaotic times, guys. I think that everyone can relate to that.
For sure.
Anyway, like I would like to know, like the dates for other spring, I mean for other semesters, other season semesters.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'll before I let anyone else jump in, I'll say, just because it's on the slide already, I always suggest putting up the whole, I mean, as far out as you can. There are some providers who have stuff out for, like a year or more ahead. And the worst that happens if you do that is people don't sign up, which is what they're doing anyway if you don't post it. So I think in general, I think the farther out, the better. But I'd love to open it up and hear if anyone else has any more specific answers to that in terms of like, not just when do you launch fall, but when do you launch then if you do spring or winter and summer as well. Taylor from New York Society of Play says they already have workshops released all the way out to the end of June 2023. Makes a ton of sense. I mean, that's the next thing that happens, right? Is the school year. And some are already full. So there you go. Thanks for sharing that, Taylor. That's great. That's a great tip. Also, just going back up here to Sherry's comment about cross-posting on eBlast and social media, and doing open houses to talk about programs and offer promo codes for tracking. That's awesome. Making sure, I think what I'm interpreting there is offering promo codes to people who come to the open houses, so you can see, oh, this is actually, we're getting a discount because someone came to this and then signed up, so we know that that's working. And you can do that with any sort of promo technique. Anyone else want to jump in here about to answer Ara's question about when or how to post and launch? Now we can move on and we can always circle back if it comes up again. Cool. We got another fun Giphy here from senior visual designer Lauren to help us answer this next question. What are some approaches to get campers to buy after school? So now we're talking about, okay, you've got campers, you've done spectacular summer camp, people love it. A lot of times these are totally different people than you see just a few days later in the fall. How do you get them to be the same people? How do you get people who love summer camp to stick around and be part of the fall? Maybe not everyone has this issue. I know a lot of providers have the issue of, we get these people in the summer and we don't see them in the fall. How can we make that connection? Some providers don't have that issue. So I'd love to hear from both providers who've had both experiences to share a little bit about how this works or doesn't work for you. I'm wondering if the silence is because no one has figured this out.
I have just my observation here is that we get people from farther away in the summer because they're kind of trying out different stuff and they're willing to travel a little farther.
Yeah.
And then during the year, particularly after school, it's all very local kids.
Do you do like
And then-
school pickups?
Yes.
Nice.
So that's, yeah. So that's why that is. And then, but I would love to get some of the summer people for Saturday classes. I think that's, you know, I guess it's like a travel thing. They're sort of going outside of their neighborhood for certain things. And so you want to be one of those things that they'll do that for.
That's a great point. So this question, I sort of like, by asking the question this way, I sort of limited it, and Leah, I appreciate you opening it back up. So I said, how do you get campers to buy after school? I am interested in that question if anyone has cracked it, but I think I love that you like broadened it and said, well, how do we get campers to come back during the year in general? And doing those like holiday closing camps and remembering that you can market to summer camp kids who maybe who aren't like your active customers during the school year, but might, to your point, Leah, make a special exception and like come drive that extra however long it is or whatever the case may be to go attend like something that they really enjoy, even if it's not a convenient after school pickup scenario. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Jesse says email is a great tool for this, for sure. And like I promised Heather earlier, we'll share a resource in the follow-up material about how to like target segment like a specific audience from Sawyer, so you know who to hit up for that. Minnie says 10% off to summer programs students who want to register for school year. We set it to expire before the school year starts or shortly after. Discounts, definitely love that for sure. And again, like special discounts, right? Like not just not just like an everyone discount, like a, hey, you're a great fit here. We love having you. We're going to give you this discount that is only good for this amount of time. You have to do it while you're currently enjoying summer camp, right? So it's not like, oh, you can just do this whenever in the future. Like summer camp is fun right now. Do you think that maybe you want to go in the fall because we need to make this decision by whatever? Can be helpful. Heather says, I teach art at the schools after school. Parents love it because they don't have to get their kids there. Heather, I'd love to hear more about this. So you're partnering with the schools and that's your location. So essentially you don't have to do school pickup because you just go to the school. I think if you're up for an unmute or typing a little bit more in the chat, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you hooked that up, because that sounds like a great situation.
Yeah, so I partner, with three of our school system has 3 elementaries. We're in a smaller area in Michigan.
Okay.
So I partnered with all 3 schools. I started with the one that my kids had gone to because I knew them.
Right.
And we did a 6-week class. And then by the end of that, the other 2 elementaries wanted to bring us on board. So
how did you get in touch with them? Just because it was the same?
Yeah, I just emailed the principals and said, hey, we're doing this class at Lincoln Elementary and would love to do it at yours. Send them pictures from the classes. And they were like, yeah, we'd love it. So
amazing.
And I rent the art room from the school. So I do have to pay rent.
They
but
make a little bit of money. That's great. I mean, it's you're not asking for a favor, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's great because we're in an art room, so there's sinks and all that. So it's a great space.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And
I mean, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, all of them were full 24 kids. Each one, it's 1 day a week for each. So I do Tuesdays one school, Wednesdays a different school, Thursdays a different school, and they sold out in like 2 to 3 days.
Amazing.
The only ones that weren't full were the end of the school year, the last 6 weeks of the end. And so this fall will be the first time I've done the first 6 weeks of the school year. So, they have other sports and other activities going on. So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, that's great. I mean, I was going to, even before you jumped in and said that, I was going to sort of call out what Leah mentioned, which is doing after school pickup, which is a great way to get people kids into your space, but you've kind of like taken that to another level. I mean, it's not always possible or easy to navigate. It's great that you had that school connection with your kids there in the first place. But not even needing to like handle the logistics of school pickup or any of that, and just go right to them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, you know, they call that a captive audience. They're there anyway.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And yeah, we do first through fifth, and it has worked really well.
That's awesome.
I'd love to know more about the pickup option as well, because I have the next school system over that they're telling me they already offer a program, but the parents are telling me that there's not. So
Okay.
I'm looking at offering something at the library.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know more about the pickup scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I know after school pickup obviously can look like many different things in many different places, but I know it's a little off topic here, but it's on topic because it's something that we're interested in. So I'd love to spend a moment on this. If anyone wants to share a little bit about what after school pickup looks like for them.
We pick up kids walking, so it's about 3/4 of a mile. And at first I thought, oh, this is going to be way too far. We've got kindergarten through 5th grade. And it's turned out to be a really great part of the program, because we do a lot of, observation of seasons and nature, and we kind of bring things we find back into the studio. And so it's become actually a core part of what we're offering here. So I actually wouldn't have the walk shorter if even if I could. So
that's great. And do you do like one school one day, or do you do like a couple stops?
We do 2 different schools. There's a K-2 school and a 3rd to 5th school. So we have 2 different groups.
Nice.
So we have one person from one person from the other.
Got it. Yeah, that's pretty common here in Brooklyn. Doing a couple schools, either making stops at each one, because not everyone ends the same day, same time, or is the same distance from your location. Is there anyone who has a version of school pickup that isn't like in a walkable neighborhood? I'd be curious to hear from anyone who does like a pickup in a vehicle from schools.
We don't have that necessarily, but we do just speaking to what was being said before about being in school. We run we have kind of like semester long residencies at different schools across this, so we can land in Harlem, even though we're based in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And so we can land in different neighborhoods at different times, and following a similar curriculum as they would have in studio, but just being able to kind of expand in that way and meet lots of new kids.
That's awesome. And how do you go about hooking that up? Is that similar, like email a principal, had a connection?
Yeah. So we have someone whose specific job it is to be our kind of community programs coordinator. And it's like a process of establishing the relationship with the school and then building that over time with kind of, like shorter workshop offers and then longer residencies. And I think it comes in a kind of anything from more kind of organic relationship that comes from a teaching artist to a more kind of full-on effort to establish that relationship. And I was just going to say just one other thing about the other thing that came to mind about getting signups for the semester was we do like sharings at the end of camp, where the students can kind of show their parents and invited guests like what they've been doing. And I think to have some staff members and some teaching artists there at those sharings to kind of then have those conversations with parents or with students afterwards and say like, wow, you really have a talent for this. You have all this like amazing, or you like really clearly enjoyed this, and kind of making that approach really personal and about their development, I think tends to have an impact not only on the parents but the student themselves as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that sounds a lot like what I was sort of talking about earlier with this like empowering students to share, but I think your example is even better. And I actually used to do this. I'm glad you reminded me of this. When I ran a summer camp in Brooklyn, like coming from the museum world, we would have these like we would set up a gallery on for every Friday and do exactly what you're talking about, where if you have if you're doing project-based camp, you can have kids show off their work. And, you know, there's some stuff to navigate in terms of like what adults are available to come. So as long as you make it really about the kids sharing,
Yeah, absolutely.
not about necessarily sharing for the parents, but sharing for each other. And then if there's some adults there, great. It can be like a really, really fun, positive experience, not to just to look forward to for the kids, but also like for them to, you know, like really like be proud of their work too, and get
Yeah,
more.
and to establish that relationship between them and the teachers or the facilitators who
Sure.
hopefully will then be, you know,
Yeah,
taking
that's a
that
great point. Really, really rewarding for the instructors too, or the camp counselors, or whatever the case may be. Let me read through a few of these call outs here in the chat. Fundraiser, another great idea. There, I mean, something that I've sort of been getting at here in these conversations is like, because I think a lot of people struggle with this, is like, how do you make that connection with a school or another community sort of like hub? Especially schools can be really hard to sort of like talk to the right person and get that in. So I appreciate everyone sharing that. And fundraisers, like a lot of school auctions, donating to the PTA, like a lot of times doing that stuff can get your foot in the door in terms of you know, making the connection with the community, and then maybe you can rent a space or do school pickup or whatever it is. Let me share, to circle back to the original question here, although I'm very happy that we talked about what was on our minds, and we're not restricted to this question, but to circle back to it, converting campers to after school, discounts like we talked about, again, especially like specific special feeling discounts. One thing also that I like to recommend is doing like a survey, because this is good practice anyway, to hear feedback about your programming. And you can incentivize for people to complete it with a discount, and the discount can be on a thing that you want them to buy anyway. So it can be like a win-win-win. So I always like to suggest summer camp survey, complete it, get percentage off after school, or you know, whatever the case may be. Talk to families at pickup. Some folks have said this already. You know, just like have conversations. Sometimes they can lead to more signups. I mean, the fact is that you're like, again, it doesn't have to be like an icky thing, right? Like odds are that these are the kids that you want to keep coming back genuinely. So it doesn't have to be like a salesy encounter, you know? And then the last thing I'll say here is sometimes you're doing a lot of stuff that is awesome and that you are underemphasizing. So a lot of times the content that you are offering from summer to fall, or week to week in the summer, or fall session to fall session, or however you describe your programming, is, whether you mean to do this or not, really complementary to the other stuff that the participants have already done. And sometimes just like emphasizing that and calling that out can be really helpful. You know, okay, maybe you did collage this week, so doing you know, I don't know. I shouldn't have picked art as an example because I'm not as comfortable in that space. But maybe next week you're doing painting and you're saying, okay, we've worked with shapes in this way. Next logical step is this. So, and I think a lot of times, just by the nature of the fact that you're doing like the stuff you're doing, a lot of the content does automatically fit together. So emphasizing that can be helpful too. All right, let's move on to the next question here. And we've got another lovely gift from our senior visual designer, Lauren. What are some approaches to get last year's after school families to return this year? And bonus, should you mark to families with a child who's aged out? So we were talking about getting campers to come to after school. Now we're talking about getting previous after school families back to after school or school year programming. And, you know, whether you should just segment it to everyone who's ever come to after school or do age specific targeting. And I'd love to hear any thoughts around this. I mean, I would guess that everyone here does some version of this. When you announce your after school programming, you announce it in some way to some people. Maybe you announce it to everyone. Maybe you don't segment specifically to retarget people from last year. That's an idea if you don't. But even if you don't, I'd love to hear about what you do.
Hi, Dylan. I'm from Yoga Fun with Marissa in Connecticut.
Okay, great.
So throughout the year, like when I'm sending reminders about classes that might have low enrollment or things like that, I'll do that where it's specific and targeted. But for like bigger things like, okay, summer programs coming or fall programs coming or things like that, I tend to send it to everybody because I've found that if people don't want to read it, they'll either delete the email or they'll ask me to take them off the list, in which case they're probably not signing their child up.
Right.
Anyways, but I mean, I've also had people like pass my contact info along to people they know, or like forward the email to friends and things like that, or reach out and be like, hey, do you have classes for my child, or do you do birthday parties? Or I kind of just tend to like send it to everybody.
That's great. Yeah.
And know that like if they don't want it, they'll either delete it or they'll ask to be removed, in which case they're not my target market anymore.
Yeah. I think that makes a ton of sense. I'm glad you shared that. And actually, you sort of read my mind on some of the stuff that I was going to highlight here in a minute anyway. So I appreciate you coming from you to have a little more legitimacy than just me. All that having been said, while I agree 100% with what you just said, I do think that for some providers that actually maybe doesn't make as much sense. As Leah was saying earlier, it can sometimes feel like these are very, very different groups of people who are coming to summer and fall. And maybe you might get an unsubscribe from someone who actually you do want to have them stay on your list so you can market to them the next time around. So I'd love to hear. So again, while I agree with everything that Marissa just said, I also think there are other different right approaches as well. And I'd love to hear if anyone has something else to share along those lines. I'll share what Heather said in the chat. Heather would market to kids who aged out unless they found out they don't have a younger sibling. Yes, I think this is very smart. I'm going to go ahead and share my notes here because I'm echoing a lot. You're echoing a lot. I'm echoing a lot of what you've said. That was an echo unintentionally. So this is when we share this out, you'll be able to click this link. This is what I was talking about before about there's a Help Center article about how to segment audiences within Sawyer so you can send stuff out. As I like to mention, reminders, repeat. Not everyone read the first message you sent out. Send out another one. They just didn't. If you're using something like a MailChimp, sometimes you can see who's opened it and you can segment down from there. But just because someone's opened it doesn't mean they haven't shared. So tends to not hurt to announce something more than once. And I agree with Heather on this. Reach out, even if the child has aged out. They may have another child who will age in soon. They may not have that child yet, but they may soon. Maybe they have friends. They probably still have friends in your age range if they just aged out. May have family. And to Marissa's point, letting someone forward along an email is the best possible thing that you can have. I mean, a recommended word of recommendation from another parent who's attending your program is like amazing. And you can ask for this explicitly. You can put in your emails, feel free to share this, or please share this to anyone who you think might appreciate it or something like that. Just so it's sort of like, it might not occur to someone to do that. And if they see that line, maybe they will. And that's, I mean, truly, that is the best possible thing you can have is one parent telling another parent, hey, my kid loved this, and I think yours will too. And that can also be a source of pride for parents too, to be sort of like the people to recommend something as great as your programming to another kid who might appreciate it. So, and again, this is echoing almost exactly what Marissa said. Worst thing that happens if you mark to someone who doesn't want to know about your stuff is they're going to ask to unsubscribe, but they weren't a customer anyway. So this is actually good. You're honing your list, and now you don't have to feel guilty about emailing your list anymore because now you know it's only people who want to be there. Great. Thanks so much for coming. We live in a summer tourist town, and I did get a few kids who are visiting, so I tag them as summer visitors and probably won't email them about after school stuff. Makes sense, but you want to keep them on the list so you can hit them up again next summer. Twinkle Toes, I offer early payment discounts, continuing students, in-house offers and deals for students who have taken the summer, etc. Love that. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Cool. All right. 2 more. And another fun gift from, say it with me, our senior visual designer, Lauren. Okay. What are some ways to attract brand new families? So like I said earlier, this is something you always have to do because as we mentioned a minute ago, kids are aging out. people are moving. So how do you do, like, how, I mean, genuinely, do you do this actively? Do you kind of do this passively and just wait for word of mouth? What works for you in terms of how to get new people to register?
I'll go. I was really a lot better about this when I was first opening, and I think as you know, word of mouth has worked for me. I've really not put a lot of attention in this, but I used to bring flyers everywhere I went with my kids. I used to just like talk to people at the playground all the time.
That's great.
And that's kind of like, you know, built up a little grassroots branding there. But I think, you know, like going to some of the school things, they have like kindergarten, you know, new family events that, you know, things like that kind of get the younger families to know that you're there. But I haven't done a lot, so I'm curious about what other people have done.
Yeah. I mean, well, you did just share some really helpful stuff. I mean, first of all, it's great that you can get away with not putting in as much effort anymore because the word of mouth machine is working. So that's awesome. And I think that says a lot about your programming. But I also I'm going to put you back on the spot for a moment because I want to hear a little bit more about what you used to do more of that works in terms of, I mean, flyering, talking to people at the playground is great. And you mentioned also going to like events at like kindergarten events. And then can you give like an example of like an event and like how you'd introduce yourself and your programming?
Sure. I think I tried to keep it informal. I don't like the sales pitchiness, but I had kids that age, so it just seemed like, you know, an easy conversation. And I got a lot of good responses because people are always looking for stuff for their kids to do. So I also was the PTA president for a couple of years during that time. And that was actually kind of I think initially I thought, oh, this is a really good way to kind of also get people to know my brand. But then I was very like, I didn't want to sort of cross that line. So I think because people knew me from two different places, it kind of helped that in itself, even if I wasn't like pitching my.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. Like just being involved in the community, even if you're not like doing it as a sales strategy,
right,
just is a thing. Just even if people see you at stuff and they're like, oh yeah, that's Leah, you know, like she's the thing. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's great. That's helpful.
That thing and that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, just getting out there is awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the other things that I went to. I mean, stuff like street festivals and like having a booth at the street fair and, you know, like having something kids can carry around the whole fair so that then people are seeing like, oh, you have a little kite. Where'd you get that kite? Oh, it's at that table over there, you know, so it's something that's really visible.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing too is like, if your community has some of these like street fairs or whatever it is, and you're not there, not to like guilt you here, but like people might notice that too. You know what I mean? Like people might ask you why you weren't there. Other people, mostly, I mean, the bigger problem is people who don't notice you because you weren't there, right? And I love the idea. There's always the one best booth with the best giveaway, right? That like all the kids are like seeing the thing. Can we go find that one? So I love that tip. That's great. Marissa says word of mouth is huge. One of my location posts flyers and reshare social media groups. It's very smart. Get the community come to you. I also posted on local moms groups that allow it on Facebook. Yep. Very, very smart. You don't want to be spammy there because that can get some negative attention. But when it's welcomed, a lot of people actually really want to see that stuff. Sometimes that's why people join these groups. This is a strategy that I was going to mention in a moment, which is parents are also just people. They're not just parents, which means that they do other things than just kids related things. So you can find parents doing parents things and remind them that you do kids things. And it's just it's brilliant. I always want to encourage people to think outside the box like that. You don't just have to find parents at parents only activities because they do other things too. Not maybe as much as they used to, but they still do them. Pass out flyers at a farmer's market. Yes, for sure. Taylor says free trials have been incredible for our Dungeons and Dragons offerings. Lots are really curious, and we retain a huge amount of participants once they've tried it. That is so great to hear. I know sometimes it can be really hard to like give up spots for free trials. And it feels like sometimes it can feel like the return on investment is hard to come by, since it does cost you money in theory, because you're paying instructors and potentially foregoing other sales if that book spot is given away. But really looking long term on the amount of, the lifetime value of those folks who you do convert is huge. So Taylor, that's great feedback. Heather says attending ice cream socials at the elementaries when the families come to meet the teacher. I could say hi and give them a flyer. Love that. Twinkle Toe says we donate to preschool and school silent auctions. It helps the community and builds exposure for the studio and brand. Love it. Let me throw a few more up here too. Go to where the families are. Like I said, connect with schools, and on our blog, we have some resources about how to do this, including, and I linked it here, so you'll get it later, a template for how to reach out. Libraries too, to echo what's already been said. And I encourage you to make friends with other after-school organizations. This has been mentioned before as well. And flyer family-friendly events. And don't forget yourself, promote your own stuff at your own space too. Like sometimes you can forget that you have like essentially free billboard space, right? So promote your next thing during your current thing, to go back to the last question. But also to hit people walking by, right? Depending on where you're located. And then convert from other offerings. We talked about camps, but parties are huge. We've talked about this in previous webinars. Parties are a moment where you have a ton of people in your space that aren't usually in there, and they're walking out with something in their hands, a goodie bag, right? You have an opportunity to make them take home something awesome that will remind them that you do other things in addition to the fun experience that they just had. And private lessons too. If you offer private lessons, get people into this space, convert them to your other programming. As I mentioned, you read my mind on this. Go to where parents are, cafes, bars, restaurants, yoga studios. That was exactly what we just said, bars, yoga studio combination, grocery stores, YMCAs, any community spaces where adults go. You have a good chance of getting some parents there too. And your stuff might stand out a little bit more there too, because it might not be the typical thing that is up on the bulletin board or whatever the case may be. Lastly, if you're not already there, join the Sawyer Marketplace, especially if you're in a city. Doesn't hurt to have your stuff up there. And going back to something that Taylor was saying, parents on the marketplace really like free stuff. Free is the most searched term on the marketplace, so offering free trials can be really helpful. All right, let's move on to the last question here. It's a two-parter, and you guessed it, we got another wonderful Giphy here from Lauren. How do you decide when to raise prices? And then we'll talk about this separately, when and how do you announce it? So this one I saved for last because this can be a tough one, and maybe, I think this can be an awkward one. So I'd love to hear, but I know that, it's relevant. It's something that, like, once you're in business a certain amount of time, you probably are going to do it at some point. And especially right now, cost of a lot of things are going up. So I know it's top of mind for a lot of providers. Does anyone have any thoughts around this? Any experience doing this? How you decide when to do it and how you go about doing it? Has anyone ever raised prices, whether or not it went well?
I did recently, and I restructured memberships. So I raised my camp price, and I raised after school, and I did that this year because of inflation.
And before I ask you how it went, which I do want to know, before I ask you how it went, how did you go about doing it? And how did you actually, more importantly, how did you decide, like, when you say inflation, can you be more specific? Like,
well, I mean, we're in an inflated, the United States is in an I don't know what they call it, an inflation era or whatever. Sure. So it's like the cost of goods is going up. I'm service, but I gave my staff raises because inflation is at like 2%, something like that, 1.9 or 2% or whatever it is. So I gave them a raise. And then also the longer I'm open, the higher they're getting paid because they have the experience, right? So like, and then my rent went up. So it's like I factor in what all of my costs have increased.
Right.
And then I raised my after school 10%. When it comes down to it, when you divide it by how many hours, it's incremental, right? I don't make big announcements that I'm raising rates. I just do.
Yeah, love that.
And I have not heard anything from anybody,
That's awesome. Yeah,
So
that's great. Once again, you are echoing something that I was going to share with everyone. And that's not to discount anyone, no pun intended, who's had a different experience with this. But I think your thinking here is really smart. It costs you more, so you need to charge more even just to make the same, right? And I love that you're factoring in what you're paying staff, what you're paying in rent, and also just like what the vibe is for people in terms of like what's going to be palatable for them. I think all that stuff is really smart. And I also think what you said about, whether to announce it. I know this can feel awkward for people sometimes because it feels already like a lot to be asking people for money for things, but really you're not asking for them. You're not asking for them to give you money for things. You're offering programming and they're deciding to buy it. So
right.
remembering that is really helpful. So yeah, I think your advice is awesome. And it's really similar to what I was going to share.
Yeah. The other thing I did with my classes, I used to do a punch card. And it was like a set amount. That amount has been the same since I first started. I restructured because number one, I want parents to see value and importance in what I do fitness. So it's like, I want them to see value in what I'm doing versus an activity for their child to come to. So I want them to come 2 days a week, which I know is a big ask for a lot of kids. So we restructured to a monthly membership that if you take advantage of all of our classes, it is substantially cheaper than paying for one class at a time. And then if you come to 2, it is still almost half the price of the punch card. And if you don't, it's more expensive, but it's like there was a twofold reason for that. So hopefully that'll work out.
Yeah, that's another great point too. And I appreciate you sharing, like, I know it gets a little complex there, but like I think and tell me if I'm misunderstanding this, but I think the underlying thing you're saying here is like, look, it actually is still a great deal if you come a lot. And you coming a lot, that helps us charge you less overall, because the more that you register, the more overall we need to get fewer different people to sign up, and we don't have to charge you as much.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And even for after school, I have a 2-day minimum. And that's not, a lot of my policies about attendance aren't about the money. It's about the dynamic with the kids, the dynamic with the coaches. Having the same kids every day is much easier for the kids and also for the staff than it is to have a different group of kids. So for summer camp, we only do weekly registrations now. And for after school, we have a 2-day minimum.
And you know what else that does too? Is it, by making it all more consistent, it helps you improve the experience for people, which is, I think, the best thing you could possibly do to like promote your programming is have great programming so that, eventually that word spreads. So that's awesome. Let me read some stuff from the chat. Yes, Marissa raised rates back in January for classes, privates, and parties. Heather raised summer camp rates from last summer as well. Didn't make a big deal or announce it, just did it. Seemed fine. Elisa says, we're about to do an announcement about our birthday pricing going up, but using it to incentivize people to book now for fall parties before prices going up. That's great. I love that. And this sort of flies in the face of what I was about to say, which is you don't have to necessarily announce price changes, but Elisa makes a very convincing case that sometimes it's really strategic to do so. And if you are going to do it in a way that actually can help move things along. Let me see what else I had here. So to Michelle's point, raise prices when your costs go up. Look at things like materials, labor, rent, other expenses, and and just, be honest with yourself about like factoring in how that works. Raise prices when your competitors do. And I put this in quotes because I just talked about sort of making friends with other local providers. I mean, I think, if someone signs up for you on Monday and another provider down the street on Tuesday, that their Tuesday sign up doesn't take away from your Monday sign up. So I think a lot of times it can be really helpful to see these as, complementary programs. And same thing with summer camps, week 1 versus week 2. Sometimes you can even, I know some camps work together to do discounts. If you sign up for them, we'll give you 10% off, and vice versa. The other thing this lets you do is have those conversations honestly with other providers about what's going on there. You can talk to families about this too. Where are they going? You can keep tabs on those prices. You can always check on highsawyer.com too to see what's happening around the country. And then here's another one that I think is maybe not so intuitive, but you can think about raising prices when you have a reliable wait list. So if you think about supply and demand, right? What's happening when you have a wait list is you have more demand at the price you're currently offering than you can satisfy with supply. So one thing you could do, open another location, increase supply, hire more instructors, whatever. Another thing you could do is raise prices, which may decrease demand, but you have a little bit of leeway to play with there, right? Because even if you lose some demand, you could still end up with the exact same amount of registrants, or maybe fewer, but maybe you still make the same amount of money or more. So the math there is something to consider as well. Let me read some more from the chat here. Minnie says, we just announced our price increase is coming in 2 weeks. So now is the time to sign up. Yep, totally agree. Same with Elisa. If you're doing it in a strategic way to create some urgency, it's almost like an early bird discount in that rate, right? We will be raising prices. Sign up now and beat that. Get in before the prices go up. Marissa is answering Eric's question. I wonder if letting current members know you'll honor their current rate for another month or 2 would help that transition for current members. Let me go back to this announcement thing. One more fun Giphy from Lauren. I think you don't have to announce it. I think for anyone who would notice, I mean, circumstances are different. And to Elisa's point, there are some really good reasons you might want to announce it, but I don't think you have to just to raise prices. If there's anyone who would notice it, the new price is the announcement because it's a different price, and that's saying it right there. And if you think about all the things that parents pay for, there's a really good likelihood that they might not notice the difference unless you're like doubling your prices or something ridiculous, which, think about how much you're going to raise your prices. But they may not notice it. Some people have shared today that they haven't heard any pushback, which is amazing. If you do announce it, consider segmenting your audience. Not if you're doing it strategic, like, what Elisa or is doing and saying buy now, that you probably want to blast that to everyone. But if you are worried about certain people giving you pushback, just tell those people. Prospective clients don't really need to know that you used to have higher prices, right? They don't get anything from that. And lastly, don't apologize. I've seen providers raise prices and apologize, and I feel this because it makes sense, because you feel bad. You're raising prices not because you want to, but because you have to, because your costs are going up. But remember that your programming is valuable. You have a premium product. If you have premium pricing, you have to be proud of it. And that's true. I mean, it make sure that, and I can confidently say that I know that you're already doing your best to make sure you have premium programming. So be proud of that and don't apologize for it. It's people who don't want to give you the money for it won't. And if they can't afford it and you can afford some sort of scholarship situation, that's great. But set that up too. Raise your prices. And if you can, give people away who can't afford all of it to pay what they can. But don't make that a reason that you don't raise prices for people who can pay that and will gladly do it. So anyway, before we move on quickly.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was just going to say part of what I want to do is make my program accessible and affordable to so that I can get a variety of kids. I want this just to be for rich kids.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to undermine my own program, and I want to pay my staff well. I want good quality materials. I have put a lot of thought into this, and I want to like acknowledge that. So I do try to publicize the scholarship funds that I have, and like really make it known on all of my pages that this is something we offer. And I have had people approach me about it, and I make that work for them every single time. So
that's amazing.
I like having that balance.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like it's perfect that you described it as a balance, because the truth is that the best way to be able to afford to offer scholarships is to charge more as a regular price to people who can pay for it, because then that lets you pay your staff more and have the wiggle room to let some people who can't afford to pay your full price to pay what they can. So really, it's sort of counterintuitive, but like kind of the best way to be able to make your programming more affordable is to make it less affordable. And this is also similar to, offering even, free trials. And I know there's, like I mentioned before, sometimes there's some hesitance to offer free trials because it's like, it can cost you money to do it. But similarly, by raising your prices for people who are paying, that then gives you a little more wiggle room to give away a few spots every once in a while for a free trial. And then those people, when you convert them, they're then paying the higher amount, and it's sort of a cycle here. So yeah, that's great. I want to be conscious of time here. We are about to run out of time, and I have promised you a secret surprise special guest who's coming with some marketing resources. So I want to get to that. Instead of going through and recapping these, I'll say hopefully we'll share out this meeting and you can get a recap that way. We've been through the marketing timeline, so let's move right on after we share the support email here for anyone who has questions. And I should also mention, you can continue the conversation on our Facebook Connect group as well. I want to get to our surprise special guest here, who has some marketing stuff, and you'll never guess who it is. It's our senior visual designer, Lauren. Lauren, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself, I'll let you take over and talk about some of the stuff that you want to share.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's awesome to hear the discussion and see where you're all going with this. So, and thank you so much for all the shout outs to my guest. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so I live in Montana, and prior to joining Sawyer, I was the graphic designer for Yellowstone Forever, which is the official nonprofit partner of Yellowstone National Park. And I love being at Sawyer, and I love not needing to say that whole name every single time I say where I work. So it's a win-win. And I just got back from a trip to Glacier National Park, which was really awesome. Yeah, all right, so let's get right into our exciting resources. So we have these new customizable marketing templates that we set up via Canva. And if you don't know Canva, it's a free resource that's a great program that you can use. It has a whole bunch of tools like GIFs, and you could easily drop and drag your own content into it. So once you click those links, you'll be taken to this page. And if you don't have a Canva account, it'll sort of prompt you to make one, which is really quick and easy. You just need your email and a name and a couple of information. So then you click use template, very exciting. And it'll load. And here it is. So some of these have moving parts and some of them don't. So this one is a layout for Instagram stories specifically, but you can also post it wherever you would like. That has supports animated content. So for, let's see, I will upload some files. I already uploaded these, but we'll do it one more time. And it'll appear there pretty quickly. and you could just drag and drop into the little kind of like landscape scene. Those are all where you can drag and drop images. So I already did this art program, but let's say I want to do something else. Intro to color pencils. And then, oh no, my text looks kind of wonky. That's really easy to fix. So you just kind of pull out this sidebar here and you can kind of adjust it all that you want. Add your pertinent information and you're good to go. And like Twinkle Toes said earlier in the chat, if you're doing like a whole bunch of these, like stick with the same colors, maybe use different layouts, but maybe, you know, change this to the green color instead. So it's kind of like similar to the one that you posted earlier. So just keep in mind, like when you're posting, you want like all your content to kind of look the same. And then once you're done with that, you click the share button in the top right, and you can either download it or share directly on your social media, which is pretty cool. They have all these plugins, but if you just want to download it, that works great too. Select your pages. So I'll just do the first page and you're done. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. No, I have a compliment. Sorry, I'm probably not supposed to do this, but this is very good. So just to like reiterate what this is Lauren made these, that's why I'm so excited to have her. Lauren made these like templates for you that you can use. We will share with you to use these templates. And she's now taking you through how to customize them to make them your own. You can change the colors, you can change the wording, time, pictures, and you know, hopefully like this can make you help make your social media presence, whatever channel you post them on, you know, takes a little bit of the design out of it, because all you really need now are the details. So that was not a question, and I apologize if I jumped in front of anyone who had one. Let me make sure to open it up. Do you folks have questions about what this is or how to use it or when to use it? Anything else here? Yeah.
It's Michelle again. I have one question. You said it's available on Canva.
Yeah.
So does anyone have access, or because I have a college student that does my social media, thank God. So she uses Canva anyway, but she'll be able to access it then.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It'll prompt you to like make a copy of it and it'll be totally yours, like on your own Canva account, once you click that like use template button. So. And
how do you, if you said it already, I'm sorry, how do you search for it?
We're going to send it around. We'll send
okay,
a
great.
follow-up email.
All right. Thank you.
We'll send you links directly here. Lauren, do you want to real quick show where to find the instructions?
Oh yeah. So if you click this notes button right here, it kind of walks you through how to replace images and what to download. So just keep in mind, probably the most important thing, if you want to use like animated content, just select an MP4 instead of a like a PNG is like a static image. So just make sure, be mindful of that. And Canva kind of usually like suggests which one to use depending on which template you use. So it should be pretty clear.
Awesome, cool. Any other questions for Lauren about how to use these templates?
These will work on Instagram Reels. Yeah, that's a great question. So it's the same kind of thing. You just download an MP4 and then set it as an Instagram Reel instead of an Instagram story.
Yeah, and Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we're talking like Instagram Reels, stories, posts. What about other social media? Facebook, TikTok? How does that work?
Absolutely, yeah. I would kind of like look at what other content is on those platforms. So for instance, Facebook has like mostly square content. Maybe use the square template instead of this like long one. So just be mindful of that, but they will work anywhere. Nice, awesome, cool. Other questions for Lauren? Sweet. Thanks, Lauren. That was as awesome as anticipated. Sorry to string everyone wrong. Awesome. Well, with that, I will thank everyone who came and participated or watched or listened today, even for many of you stayed the whole time, which I appreciate. And like I said, we'll share some follow-up resources about all of this. And here's to finishing the summer out strong and starting the fall strong as well. All right. Thanks again, y'all.